Story time!
Warning contains somewhat mature content, including language, brief violence, and mild sexual themes, and may not be suitable for people under age 14. It was May 3rd, 2014, and I was having a blast celebrating Suicide Day at the amusement park in Wayward City with my friends. It's an interesting holiday, and it's always on the first Saturday of May. Mortals were lined up to ride the euthanasia coaster, enter the death house, or were simply enjoying their last day on Encephalon to engage in a private passing. Not every mortal celebrated by killing themselves, however. Like me, many simply enjoy the happy environment in the city. Yes, believe it or not, it truly was a euphoric occasion. There were food stands set up in the park to appeal to any species or race on Encephalon, as well as special games and entertainment. I was standing with Senpai and Evelyn, staring curiously at a white sheet covering a massive structure. The Jisatsu brothers were standing in front of it, arms linked, and dressed almost like circus masters.
Come on, come on!
They called in unison, addressing the huge crowd that had accumulated around the mysterious object.
Hosts, others, angels, demons, and undead alike, prepare to be amazed! For here we have a brand new ride,
said Keen.
A ride that many of you will be ecstatic to see,
continued Geen.
Mortals, are you sick and tired of not being able to ride the euthanasia coaster because you don't want to die?
Boomed Keen, and a majority of the crowd's eyes lit up, and Senpai, Evelyn, and I looked at each other excitedly.
Well, so are we!
Shouted Geen.
We brothers are human, as luck would have it, and we hate gazing longingly at this beautiful creation of a coaster. And though it won't be as intense as the real thing,
said Keen, gripping the sheet,
you'll still get a little taste of the horror and thrill that is the euthanasia coaster without snuffing it.
He tugged hard, and with a mighty whoosh, the new ride was revealed. Every single one of us gasped. It was another roller coaster, nearly identical to the euthanasia coaster, except smaller. The 7 loops were spaced out a bit further, the first 6 in groups of 2, and the 7th standing near the end. It was still a pretty terrifying size, but compared to the full-sized one, it was merely a kiddie ride.
We've tested this on many mortals,
said Geen proudly, and his twin chuckled.
Some against their will,
he added softly, but clear enough for all of us to hear, as if he was just pretending he didn't want to be heard.
Each one lived to remember their experience on this ride. There was a lot of vomit, so much vomit, and a few went into short comas, but there's a 100% survival rate for mortals in their adult stages in life.
I let out a very high-pitched squeak that made a few people around me flinch.
So if you're scared, book yourself a hospital bed,
said Keen happily,
and make sure your stomachs are empty. Also, for today only, anyone who manages to stay conscious and not throw up will get a prize.
Geen held up what looked like a yellow egg, a little bigger than an ostrich egg, and it shimmered unnaturally bright despite the lack of sunflower light. There were loud gasps and oohs amongst the audience.
That's right,
both twins said together.
A real cap's egg! Leave the mini-nasia coaster in decent condition and you'll receive your very own!
I want,
Senpai said softly, her eyes huge and sparkling as she stared at the cap's egg. Cap's eggs are extremely rare, and are usually found underground near Mount Venushka, the volcano in Smilesville. The reason they are so special is because, when broken open, you will receive the item that you've always wanted. Sometimes the cap's egg is able to reach deep into your subconscious to find what your heart truly desires.
So get in line, don't be shy, hop on, strap in, and enjoy the ride!
Said the twins, and they moved aside, making way for people to queue up behind the new coaster's gate. I gave a little hop and turned to the other two.
I'm going for it!
I squeaked, trembling violently from excitement and fear.
Me too!
Cheered Evelyn, throwing her arms into the air.
Nalevi's always going on about how fun the euthanasia coaster is, and I get so bummed because I want to ride it too!
Are you gonna do it, Senpai? I asked, turning to my red-haired friend. She looked just as terrified as I felt, a shaking smile playing her face.
Oh, I really want to,
she choked.
But I don't know. I mean, I love those kind of rides, and I always tried to convince you to go on the big ones with me.
I know, I groaned. It took me this long to grow some balls. But hey, look at that thing! It still has 7 fucking loops! Senpai made an odd eep sound, and then she finally seemed to explode with joy.
Let's do
she shrieked, and the three of us sprinted to the line. I'm going to get so sick, I said, running my fingers through my hot pink hair, which I had styled into a tiny ponytail for the day, seeing as how Senpai and I had entered the talent show that would take place later in the evening. She herself had straightened her hair, so now it was a very sleek curtain that fell attractively over the left side of her face. There's no way I'm gonna win a cap's egg.
Hey, maybe if you take some gender bend elixir and seduce them, they'll give you one anyway, said Evelyn.
Oh, ha ha, I said sarcastically, and she furrowed her brow.
I was being serious.
I shook my head, grinning exasperatedly, and we chatted through the long wait in line. When we got quite near the gate, Kota cut right in front of us.
Excuse me,
he said nonchalantly, and Senpai smacked his upper arm.
Hey, get to the back of the line,
she barked, but Kota simply dismissed her demand with a wave of his hand.
Make me,
he jeered, flashing her a smile, which made her blush. Kota knew full well that Senpai had a huge crush on him, even though she was aware that he was spoken for.
Oh, let him stay, said Evelyn. Maybe he'll win us a cap's egg.
You're yanking my wang, girlfriend,
Kota said smoothly.
That cap's egg is mine.
What do you want from it?
Senpai sneered, and Kota sighed.
A ball of lint. Seriously, you really think I'm gonna share that with you guys?
Dick, I spat, but I was quite amused. At last, we were able to board the Mini-Nasia coaster. I sat in a car with Senpai, and Evelyn took her place next to Kota. A speaker buzzed on, and the conductor for the ride began to speak.
Dailies and Mentalgen, thank you for riding with us this fine suicide day,
he said in a low jazz radio-type voice.
Remember that no food, drink, bags, electronic devices, or weapons are allowed on the coaster, and keep your hands inside the car at all times. We will not be held responsible for missing fingers. Also, keep in mind that if you manage to survive, you will receive a free cap's egg as a prize. Hold on tight, you're in for a wild ride, and enjoy.
The cars jerked as they slowly moved forward and began to climb the ascending tracks. I remembered that day when Annatier tried to trick me to ride the Euthanasia coaster, and recalled how high that one was. I couldn't help but scoff. This one was nothing. However, after about 45 seconds, we reached the top, and the cars halted, teasing us with the view of how high up we really were. Now I was shaking. Sure, it wasn't nearly as high as the full-scale one, but it was still pretty damn high.
I regret nothing!
Shouted a male voice, and the rest of us didn't have a chance to laugh, for we plunged, shooting at such incredible speed, I felt flattened against my seat. Screaming hurt my chest, and I could hardly breathe. 100% survival rate. Were the brothers telling the truth, or were they simply having a laugh? The first two loops nearly pulled my brain right out of my head, and my vision became blurred like it did when I don't eat for a while. I seriously couldn't decide if I was having the time of my life, or if I was in excruciating agony. I was unable to turn my head to see if Senpai was alright, for she was so silent, it was as if she wasn't there. I don't remember much after that, for the next 5 loops made me black out temporarily. By the time the cars slowed and finally stopped, I wasn't sure where I was. Kota leapt out of his car, both arms in the air, hands giving off devil signs.
Woo!
He cried, doing a 360 twirl on the spot.
That was tense! That was so tense!
Evelyn wobbled out, giggling weakly, looking around in a daze, as if she was hallucinating. I couldn't move, or even see for that matter. I felt a hand help me out, and when my vision slowly cleared, I saw that Kota was helping Senpai and I walk. Senpai was pale as a ghost, her eyes wide, lips shut as tight as possible. Just then, she ripped away from Kota and ran to the trash can, which was already surrounded by people, and vomited, barely even making it in. I was feeling my own stomach churning, a huge lump in my throat, but...
All right,
said the conductor to Kota, Evelyn, and I.
3 cap's eggs for the survivors. Congratulations!
I smiled at him as convincingly as I could, trying to keep my posture straight.
I'm going again!
Exclaimed Kota, and he dashed off without saying goodbye. Evelyn and I assisted poor Senpai away from the coaster and to a bench. As the other two sat down, I glanced at the ride and was relieved to see we were out of sight of the conductor. I finally retched. I was a bit embarrassed that I hadn't been near a trash can, but I couldn't hold it in any longer. When my stomach was empty, I slumped on the bench, my head pounding violently.
You really wanted that cap's egg, didn't you?
Croaked Evelyn, and I nodded.
Damn it.
Senpai breathed, her eyes shut tight.
I was so sure I could handle it. I wanted a calf's egg, too.
I stared at her, and then glanced at the beautiful object in my hands. Slowly, I closed my eyes briefly, and calmly placed it on her lap. Her own eyes shot open, and she looked at me.
What are you doing?
Happy Suicide Day, I said with a laugh.
What? No!
She tried pushing the calf's egg back into my arms. Take it, I insisted. I want to see what you get.
It's supposed to be what you want, Rei,
Senpai growled, but I shoved the calf's egg back at her. I want you to have it. She looked extremely guilty, but then smiled gratefully, slipping the calf's egg into her bag.
Thank you,
she murmured.
So, how are we feeling?
Asked Evelyn.
Do you think we should rest?
Yeah, I replied. I don't want to perform in this state. We gotta get our energy back.
I second the motion,
Senpai sighed, leaning her head back and closing her eyes again. As we sat there, I could have sworn I saw Kota ride the mini Neja coaster like 3 more times. By 7 o'clock, we were back on our feet. The 3 of us cleaned ourselves up to get ready for the talent show. I had to flat iron Senpai's hair again, for it had started to try and curl. At last, we headed backstage. Evelyn was doing a duet with Tenji, which was extremely amusing because they were singing a song from SpongeBob SquarePants. It was from the episode where Mr. Krabs lost SpongeBob to Plankton in a game of cards. Tenji himself played Mr. Krabs, which was side-splittingly hilarious due to his over-dramatic gestures. Senpai and I waited quietly, watching the acts. There were quite a few songs, but there were also skits and comedy routines. Kota actually participated in an outrageous skit with the Ace of Hearts.
Who's on first?
Kota asked Hearts.
Who?
Hearts replied, and Kota became frustrated.
Who? Who's on first? That's what I'm asking! Who is on first? Honey, you're gonna be on first if you don't stop asking that question.
Kota blinked.
Wait, what? First base, baby, get on your knees!
The audience roared with laughter. The other 3 aces in the crowd placed their foreheads in their palms. Finally, Senpai and I were up, and we nervously, but excitedly, walked out on stage. The lights were off. No one could see a thing. And then a spotlight flashed right onto me.
I've paid my dues,
I sang softly.
time after time.
A second spotlight hit Senpai.
I've done my sentence, but committed no crime. And bad mistakes,
I continued, taking a step forward dramatically.
I've made a few. I've had my share of sand kicked in my face, but I've come through.
Senpai and I sang We Are the Champions with epic body language and powerful voices, and all stage fright left me as I got into it. It was one of the best times I've ever had with my best friend, until I felt a drop of liquid on the back of my hand. I stopped singing, and Senpai glanced at me questioningly, for it had been my turn. My eyes widened at the red spot on my skin, and suddenly 2 more appeared. Slowly looking up, the drops increased in abundance, and the entire audience was silent as well.
It's raining!
A woman shrieked hysterically, and everyone screamed, scattering in all different directions. In seconds, Senpai and I were drenched in the blood rain, but we were so horrified we couldn't move. With difficulty, I spoke. Where is iapmes? I whimpered. Senpai was hyperventilating, and panic started to strike her.
I don't know!
She exclaimed, wringing her hands.
She doesn't celebrate by coming to the park. I think she might be at the theater. Where's Annatier?
Probably on a ride, but knowing her, she's probably freaking out too, trying to find me.
Hurry!
The 2 of us leapt off the stage and sprinted toward the rides. We were soon joined by Evelyn, who was sobbing.
I don't know where Naleve is!
She cried, her tears mixing with the blood on her face. Stay with us, we're trying to find Anna and Ippy, I said, sounding braver than I felt. Ugh, the one day I don't bring my katana to the city! We froze in our tracks, staring at the scene in front of us. Horrifying creatures dressed in black hooded cloaks were swarming the park, each one hovering about 3 inches above the ground. They were pursuing fleeing citizens, and once one got close to someone, long, flowing silver hair snaked its way from under the hood, grabbing the victim and entangling them. I watched as another was caught, and as she screamed bloody murder, the being's cloak opened, revealing a cloud of black mist where a body should be. The poor girl was then sucked in, absorbed into the creature's void. Collectors, I whispered, my entire body feeling cold. Evelyn was crying even harder now, and I knew that she was worried about Naleve. The collectors were creatures that appeared in the city only when it rained, which was the only weather change that was possible. The rain was not water, but pure crimson blood. The collectors mainly went after others, but if a different species or race got in their way, they would take them without hesitation. The only way to be safe was to either lock yourself in a building or leave the city.
Guys!
Called a familiar voice, and we turned to see Kota sprinting toward us. He had a pair of pistols strapped to his belt. When he stopped, we noticed his eyeliner was running from sweat.
You alright? Where are your others?
We don't know, I said, trying my best not to cry.
Reitanna, do you have your katana?
Normally, I would have laughed at the rhyme, but I sure didn't feel like laughing at that moment. No, I forgot it, I replied.
Maybe Anna has hers,
said Senpai, and I could tell she was trying not to burst into tears as well. I suddenly saw the aces flash past, taking out as many collectors as they could. The ace of clubs turned to the four of us.
What are you doing?
He shouted angrily.
If you're not going to fight, run!
Kota grabbed his guns from his belt.
I'm gonna stay and fight,
he told us.
You get out of the city.
If you see Ippy, Anna, or Naleve, send them to my house,
said Senpai, and after receiving a nod from Kota, we continued to run, searching for our others. There was a nasty screech of a girl, and I flipped around to see Lady tangled in one of the collector's hair. I snatched a rock from the ground and sprinted toward them.
Reitanna, no!
My friend shouted, but I hurled the rock at the creature's head. It released Lady to come after me instead, but then a blonde woman tackled it from behind, slashing it repeatedly with a butcher knife. It was Lizzie. She attacked the collector until it disappeared in a wisp of black mist.
Woo!
Lizzie cheered, hopping to her feet, and, without acknowledging me or Lady, ran off to attack another one. Lady was staring at me from the ground, panting and covered in cuts from the collector's hair.
Thank you,
she squeaked, but I kicked her side, making her groan. I don't need your praise, I snarled. Now get out of here before I change my mind and throw you back to them. Lady scrambled to her feet and took off. Just then, something shot toward me from the sky, and I ducked as it passed me. Turning around, I saw iapmes standing in front of her host. Senpai threw her arms around her, finally starting to cry.
I was so worried,
she gasped, and Ippy hugged her back.
I'm okay.
She assured her.
Flying has its advantages.
Where's Naleve?
Evelyn burst out. And annatier, I added.
I'm not sure,
iapmes admitted.
I'll help you find them.
Do you think Anna went home?
Senpai asked me.
She lives so close to the park.
Genius! I exclaimed, and iapmes threw Senpai onto her back, and then hoisted Evelyn and I into each of her arms. When she had a good hold, she took off into the air. The scene below was tragic. People running, trying to get to safety, some getting snatched up by those horrible monsters. But there were still the ones fighting, the murderers of the city seeming to be having a blast. I hoped Kota would be okay. We arrived in front of Annatier's gate, but before we could open it, we heard someone shout at us from behind. Turning, we saw Gin Jisatsu poking his head out of the door to his house, which was directly across from Anna's, and he was gesturing urgently for us to come to him. We obliged, and Gin ushered us inside. Immediately, I spotted annatier and Naleve on the couch, hugging each other tightly and crying hysterically. When they saw Evelyn and I, they hopped up and embraced us.
Naleve!
Evelyn sobbed, holding her others so tight it looked like she was trying to break her.
I was so worried! I was so scared! They almost got me! I didn't know what to do, and then annatier saw me and said that we should go to her house, but then we ran into the twins and then we came here and I was so worried about you too!
Said Naleve. Annatier was holding on to me as if the world was ending. She didn't speak, but simply cried into my chest. It was normal for her to remain speechless when she was extremely upset.
This is a disaster,
said Keen angrily.
Rain, on the day of all days! I can't believe those 3 weeders were right,
said Gin. Keen growled and plucked his shirt collar, then opened a closet and took out a large sword.
I'm going out there.
Gin grabbed him suddenly.
No!
He wailed.
You'll get hurt! You might get killed! I'll be fine. What will I do if you die, huh? Gin, I'll be fine.
Keen set his hand on his brother's shoulder.
Take the girls into Smilesville, alright? Make sure nothing happens to them.
Gin looked furious, but he and Keen kissed briefly.
You better come back alive,
Gin hissed, and without another word, Keen walked out. Turning to us, Gin let out a heavy sigh, and then put on his professional face.
Alright, here's what's gonna happen. Iapmes, how many can you carry?
4.
Iapmes replied.
Okay, you take Sempai, since she's your host, as well as Annatier and Nileve. Reitanna, you and Evelyn decide who's gonna go with them.
Evelyn faced me immediately.
I'm gonna stay with Geen.
She said, and before I could object, she grabbed my hand.
Don't argue! You know damn well I'm way better at defending myself than you are.
I didn't want to admit it, but she was right. Okay, I finally agreed.
We'll all go to my house,
Said Senpai.
Meet us there.
Gotcha.
Geen replied, and we all left the house. With difficulty, Senpai and I clung to Ippy's back, and she wrapped her arms around Anna and Nileve. Then she gave a mighty flap of her wings and shot back into the air, soaring toward Smilesville. As we flew over the city, I caught sight of dead Molly, who was walking very slowly down the street, and every collector she passed exploded into black mist. It seemed she was using telekinetic powers to destroy them, and it sort of reminded me of Carrie. After a few minutes, I stopped feeling the rain beating against my skin, and the sky became bright and cheerful. Iapmes headed toward the Blackwell farm, but as she went, we saw that the border was surrounded by Smilesvillians, each one of them gazing at the city still being showered with blood. I was glad to see a few others and citygoers had managed to escape, hugging friends and hosts. Finally, we landed in front of Senpai's house and trudged inside. I was exhausted, and I could tell the others were as well. Glancing at Senpai and Iapmes, I saw that both of them were embracing, tears running down their cheeks. I didn't even know Ippy could cry.
This is the worst suicide day ever!
Annatier shouted at last, throwing her hands into the air angrily.
I hate my life!
Just be glad that we're all safe, I said to her, stroking her jet black hair soothingly. She swatted me away, leaving a light scratch mark on my arm.
Don't touch me!
She whined childishly, and then stomped over to a corner and sat in it.
What about Evelyn?
Nileve whimpered.
Is she okay? I hope she's okay. If she's not okay, then I won't be okay, and that's not okay!
She continued to sob, throwing herself onto the sofa. She'll be fine! Ippy pulled away from Senpai.
I'm going to fly back over to see if I can get them.
She said.
But the collectors won't be able to reach me in the sky.
Hurry back,
said Senpai, and her other left the house. It remained silent in the room, save for Nileve's soft crying, and Senpai and I took to pacing the floor, communicating by giving each other worried looks every now and then. It was another 10 minutes before the door opened again, and Iapmes returned with Geen and Evelyn. Evelyn tackled Nileve, hugging her again.
We saw Keen,
Geen told us.
but he refused to come. We told him to head here when he's done. God, I hope he doesn't get hurt.
Will you look at us?
Said Evelyn with a small laugh.
Covered in blood? We look like we committed a mass murder.
I gave a half-hearted laugh, but it died quickly, for I was too upset to really feel humor. As we continued to wait, Evelyn and Nileve went outside to play with the rolling sheep, but the rest of us stayed inside. Annatier's mood changed, and she sat next to me on the couch, allowing me to try and console her. The silence was almost painful. Then, about an hour later, Koda pushed the door open, supporting an injured Keen with his arm. When they entered, Geen desperately demanded Koda to tell him what happened, and examined his brother to make sure he was still breathing.
He's okay.
Koda assured him.
We're both okay.
Keen stood with difficulty, wincing.
One of them got a hold of me,
He explained hoarsely, showing off his wounds caused by the collectors.
but I managed to gather enough strength to cut its damn head off.
It stopped raining now.
Koda added.
The entire city looks like shit. Ironic, huh? Rain on Suicide Day?
I'm not sure this is how people wanted to go, I said with a weak smile.
not to mention all the ones who didn't want to go at all,
Said Senpai.
I hope that not too many got taken.
What do you think happens to you when you're absorbed by them?
Asked Koda.
That might be how they feed.
Iapmes replied.
Or they get taken to a different dimension, trapped for all eternity.
Either way, I said sadly. Terrible way to die. The others agreed.
Hey, let's go to Clearwater Beach.
Suggested Senpai.
Get all this blood off of us and just enjoy the rest of the holiday.
The moonflowers are out.
Said Koda.
It's night.
So, there's no problem with going to the beach at night. We can have a bonfire.
I think that sounds fun, I said with a smile. We can stop by the market on the way there and get some snacks.
Yay, snacks!
Cheered Annatier suddenly, and she began to giggle uncontrollably. I went outside to tell Evelyn and Nileve about our plan, and then we all started gathering things together to take to the beach. I was glad we had decided to go to Clearwater Park. The air was so peaceful, we became as content as we would be if nothing ever happened. We stayed at the beach pretty late, playing in the ocean and then gathering around the bonfire to sing songs and tell scary stories. When we all started to grow tired, we decided to stay in a motel for the night, seeing as how we all just want to forget about the tragedy of the day. Next year, I'm bringing my katana.